The aim of today's quick lunchtime get together is pretty simple, really. It's to get you thinking and it's to get you talking. Judging by the number of you joining us today, imposter syndrome is the topic that really resonates. Strong, successful women, women we admire, talk about it in their own lives. Some of the stories we are hearing through the current national conversations on women at work and women in leadership show that this isn't just something that's in our heads. We don't necessarily like the term imposter syndrome. There are other terms that people use for this situation, such as self-limiting beliefs. All of this terminology might have its own issues for different people. So today we're going to set aside the semantics and we're going to focus on sharing women's voices and experience around this topic. So to be very clear from the outset, we at Leadership Victoria are not in the business of providing easy answers. You'll not be walking away today with a neat 4-point plan. I'm sorry. No, I'm not actually. Instead, you will actually be part of something that we do a lot of here at LV. And that is that we bring people together. And we bring them together to share their experiences and their stories of leadership and to learn from each other, to consider different perspectives, to help you reflect on your own views and experiences, and really to keep that conversation going with the women in your life. So the women that you work with, your friends and your family, and right across your networks. Leadership for us at Leadership Victoria is an activity. It's not necessarily a formal role. So we work from the premise that anyone can lead anytime, anywhere. And today you will hear from 3 alumni of LV's different women's leadership programs. That's Lee Sandwith, Emma Wu, and Alicia Robinson. They will share a 5-minute snapshot of their own experiences and perspectives and some of the ways they have found to move beyond imposter syndrome. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker, Lee Sandwith. So Lee, if you would like to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here as a LV alumni, but I'm also delighted to hopefully impart some nugget of wisdom about how I personally have confronted my own demon, which is the imposter syndrome. A little bit of background on me. I have had what I have termed a hybrid career. I currently work for myself. I run a consultancy. I have a global team. I'm based in regional Victoria. I'm doing something that I never dreamed I would. I started in the public sector. I have had a career working for the state government, the City of Melbourne. I've worked for large corporations. I've worked in creative sectors, and I've fully synthesized that into my own business, which is doing really well. And I have a great team of people. But my journey here, there were a few moments that led me to this path. I was quite happy working as in the public service. I had a job that I loved very much, but I was made redundant while I was on maternity leave when I had my second child. So I had an infant and a 2-year-old, and I was made redundant. And it was the second redundancy I'd had in my career, both when I was returning back to work after having children. So it was a really defining moment in my life where I made a decision that I had to back myself, because I found that the obstacles within my organisations, the organisations I worked, were not something that I could take on myself. I sort of look at some of the gender concerns that we all face, or women face, and men working collectively with us, that's this giant iceberg, and we actually all need to take the ice pick and chip away. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. I wish I could take a bat to it, but I can't. So for me, I decided to leave the public sector and work for myself. But I still consult within the public sector, so I'm still facing some of the concerns that I have with being an imposter. Am I good enough to be working in these spaces? Will people listen to my ideas? Will they value my ideas? Can I make change with my ideas? I think age has certainly helped me with my confidence, because I almost feel like, now what have I got to lose? If I don't give it a go, I'll always doubt myself. So age is one of the things that I think has been a really, really positive thing for me, because we do wear a lot of masks in our roles, where we pretend that we're okay and that it's fine, and that rejection that you have is that you feel is fine. We sort of carry that. I think one of the main things that I look back on is, and I still have imposter syndrome, but I certainly don't have it as vastly as I had it maybe a decade ago, is that I've been able to identify that I absorbed a lot of the sexism and misogyny that was projected at me or to my female colleagues who I was working with over the years. And I actually doubted myself because I absorbed that. Sometimes when you can actually put a label on it and see what it is, you actually don't own it. So I was actually able to see that some of the behaviors that I took as I'm feeling insecure because I don't fit in here, was actually me absorbing some of the misogyny that was in the workplace. And the misogyny can also come from women. We also have our own internalized misogyny that we have been conditioned to carry throughout our professional life and our personal lives. And until you actually can start sort of pinning it, going, actually, that was really sexist of me. I shouldn't be viewing that of her. Or I was able to kind of break it down. So it was identifying what was making me feel like an imposter, because I am just as skilled and capable and talented and ambitious. And those women are viewed very differently in men when they have similar traits. So once I was actually able to identify what was occurring around me in that space, I was less likely to absorb it. I didn't carry it anymore, because I went, actually, this is misogyny. This is not because I'm not capable. So for me, that was a really big thing to chip away at, is self-recognition in that space, is not carrying that. I know it's not the silver bullet answer, but for me, it's been a way that I've been able to personally confront my own concerns about whether I'm worthy enough to be in the work that I'm doing. I think, age is certainly a huge part of that. I used to worry and doubt that they're going to find out that I can't do this. I'm not, especially when I got promoted and I was managing teams, and especially when I moved up the leadership space, I was really concerned that people would find out I was a bit of a fraud. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? A girlfriend of mine who I work with, who also works in leadership, she said to me, think of yourself as a mediocre white man. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, well, sometimes men have confidence that we're trying to boost ourselves up. And there's a lot of men who walk into spaces who feel really confident, and they may not have the skills. And that's because of gender imbalance, that men don't have the same insecurities that women do. She said, walk in their shoes. Imagine walking to a room feeling like a confident man. And sometimes that mask actually has helped me sort of break down some of my fears when I walk into meetings or go for promotions or win work, whatever it is. I think it's also important to track your success and look back at what you've achieved. Quite often we are looking forward and always want to go, well, will this work for me? Will I succeed at this? Will people think that I'm good enough to do it? I think it's really valuable to look back at your success. And your success doesn't always have to be a critical success within your workplace. It could be that you managed a really complex thing at your kids' school sports, or it could be that you are someone that speaks 2 languages and helped your migrant parents' business succeed when you were younger. Framing your whole life and your whole success as a human and what you've done can sometimes knock out that imposter syndrome a little bit, because quite often we've achieved more than we've actually recognized within ourselves. So that's certainly something that I do take stock of my success and try and not let my inner saboteur say you're actually not worthy of this moment.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lee. Encapsulated in a very tight little package there. Thank you so much.
I hope I did it.
And just a reminder, we, if you would like to ask any questions, you can pop that in the chat and we can come back to it at the end. Let's move on now to Emma. Emma Wu, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and share your experience?
I'd love to. And my goodness, following up Lee, isn't that an example of imposter syndrome in itself? As Lee was talking, I'm like, oh my God, why am I going second? Should have gone first. But as Nicole said, my name is Emma Wu, and I participated in the Women's Leadership Program in 2019, along with Lee. And I can see a couple of familiar faces as well today, which is really lovely. Again, when Anoni first reached out and asked me if I was available to speak to you all today, my first reaction was, oh my God, why is she asking me? What do I have to offer? And again, an example of what I wanted to share with you all today when it comes to imposter syndrome and how I deal with it. So for me, imposter syndrome is something that I first realised affected me when I took on my first leadership role at ANZ Bank. And back then I was in my early 20s. I was only a few years out of uni, and I was tasked with facilitating a national training program of about 1,000 bankers, as my boss at the time had to take some unexpected leave. And this meant that I had to travel around the country for work, which was cool for the first couple of flights. And then after that is never as glamorous or fun as you think it is, and deliver a 2-hour training session to bankers, many of whom had been in their roles for longer than I had even been alive. And you know what? It really got to me in those first couple of sessions. I thought to myself, what could I have to offer them? Who am I to go against all of their experience in this room and teach them something new? How can I even make conversation with them? I wasn't even born yet when they started working. And that meant all of the content I had spent weeks preparing, all of the activities and prompts for discussion that I had thought about, all of that stayed in my head. And it wasn't until one of the leaders pulled me aside for a bit of a pep talk, and he could see I was nervous and overwhelmed. And he said to me, you are in this role for a reason. No one in this room knows as much about this topic as you do. And that's something that stayed with me throughout my career. And it was really consolidated when I had the chance to spend a number of days with an amazing group of leaders as part of the Women's Leadership Program. I came out of that program with the realization that for me, imposter syndrome is a constant, and it's something that I'll probably never overcome. I'm often the youngest person in the room. I'm often the only female in the room. I'm often the only person with Asian heritage in that room. And for me, I think that means I need to constantly remind myself that my role has a purpose, that I deserve to be in the room, and that what I have to offer is of value. And it means that I need to keep putting myself in uncomfortable situations, knowing that I have a strong support network around me, which is really critical. Things like applying for a new job last year, starting just before lockdown hit, and even sharing my story today. All of these are examples of me actively putting myself in those uncomfortable situations. And similar to Lee, I'm also a pretty data-driven person. And so I have an app that I use. It's called Pep Talk Her. And it's an amazing way to capture on a daily basis, really, all of my achievements, whether they're big or small. It means that I can take that time to reflect each month similarly on all of the different ways that I've been able to add value to my role, to my team, to my work. And it also comes in really handy at performance review time because I've got my list of achievements all ready to go. Again, it forces me to step out of that imposter syndrome and celebrate everything I've done. I've spoken already about having a strong support network around me to help me deal with imposter syndrome, but I should also mention that as a leader, and particularly as a leader of a team of females, I see myself as having a responsibility to create an environment where they can openly discuss their fears, challenges, and goals, get thrown in the deep end safely, and feel like they can pursue any opportunities that come their way, even if it means having to leave my team for new horizons. And what this looks like in practice is it looks like me having regular development conversations with my team. It means publicly praising their achievements, and it means demonstrating in all of my actions that they've got my unconditional support. And all of these things are constant reminders to my team that their role has a purpose, that they deserve to be in the room just as much as everyone else. And so I hope that sharing just a little bit of my experience today has given you all a little bit of food for thought, whether that's dealing with imposter syndrome within yourself or as a leader, because I think we all need that constant reminder that what we can offer is valued and that we, deserve to be in that room as well. So back to you, Nicole.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma. Some great practical tips and also experience there. So I'm going to hand over now to Alicia Robinson, who's coming to us from Donald out in the Wimmera, I believe.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Nicole. You'll have to excuse me, everybody. I'm reading from some paper. I'm clearly very nervous, so bear with me. So as mentioned, my name is Alicia Robinson and I'm an alumni for the Women Leading Now program 2020. I'm a farmer's wife, I'm a mother. Well, these are my day gigs anyway, and to be honest, probably really my only gigs at the moment. It might surprise you to know that when we talked about imposter syndrome in the Women Leading Now program, I actually didn't think it pertained to me. But after being asked to speak at today's event, I went into the depths of researching and found myself knee-deep in Google and a lot of TED Talks. So that has brought me here to this. Imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments and has a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. I imagine there's a few of you right now saying, yep, I know what you're talking about. I need you all to stay there because what comes next is alarming, but also very thought-provoking. When you hear that sentence, you realize how powerful imposter syndrome is, and you wonder how long you've let imposter syndrome control your thoughts and your beliefs and your achievements. So I'm going to cut straight through to what happened to me last night, just to give you an example. I rang my best friend in West Australia and I read her out what I was going to say today, and she said it was very good, but it didn't sound like me. I then jumped straight on the defense and I say, I don't know what I'm even doing talking at an event like this. Let's be honest, I'm just a glorified steering wheel attendant, if that, and I literally just enter data to get invoices sorted. The phone went silent and she turned around and said to me, you need to do this more than you know, and I know exactly why you've been asked to do this. She then said, you go from putting children on a school bus in the morning to driving a tractor. You are entering invoices for things half of us didn't even know existed. You're attending to people's needs on the farm. You're cooking lunches and dinners and making sure everything is ticking along. You need to be a part of this, Alicia, because I see you and I wish you would see you too. So if you haven't worked it out already, you really need a Christie in your life, because I'm pretty lucky to have one. So let me introduce myself again. As a nod to the advice received last night, I'm Alicia Robinson. I'm a farmer. I still use that term very sparingly, and I certainly do not feel like I have the right to use that term, even though I've been farming ever since I left school, even before I married a farmer. But I've always been in an industry where women were not encouraged and their work on the land was not always recognised as a job. So when I went to university to study agriculture, it was assumed I would take an administration role or become a rural bank manager. This is where we cue the beginning of my imposter syndrome. So all of my adult life, I've struggled with that feeling that I don't fit in or belong with my peers. I'm constantly trying to educate up and give 1,000% in the hopes that this makes me enough. So I'm going to go through a few things that I've read recently that really resonated with me and share some of my ideas of cutting through the crap and moving beyond that limiting headspace. The first thing, and for me, the one I was nodding to a lot, was you wouldn't be doing what you were doing if you didn't belong here. Boom. Isn't that the truth? Every internal characteristic comes from what you tell yourself. So change the narrative. For some reason, so many of us are believing that negative narrative. You really are limiting your potential by constantly believing you're an imposter. One of the big key value-adding thought processes in my life right now, and a tool I'm going to use in my combat with imposter syndrome, is focusing on measuring my own achievements, not comparing myself to others. I have my own set of valuable tools and they are of great value. A dangerous cycle someone who suffers from imposter syndrome must break is that belief that they have to work harder if they do not achieve, then they must punish themselves. This cycle is so detrimental to our well-being and growth. The narrative here has to change. We need to be congratulating ourselves for the effort and swiftly reminding ourselves that no one is perfect and that we can only do our best and that our best is always enough. So finally, in my last moments of reflection, I decided to leave you all with this. You deserve to be where you are. You need to believe in yourself. If you've been sitting here listening today and you've done a lot of nodding at what I'm saying, and what I'm saying is resonating with you, then honestly, dive a little deeper and work with yourself to combat this. It is holding you back and it will be affecting your well-being, and you can absolutely change the narrative. Thanks for listening. Sorry I read off a piece of paper. I really pushed through some personal barriers today doing this with you guys, so I really appreciate all of your time. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Alicia. We love your honesty and also your level of research that went into that as well. So I think I'd look, this is a really short and sweet session, and I just feel that we've got so much out of it. All three of you just really spoke from the heart, as we say at LV, and really added some great value, some great experience. And I really hope that all of you took away some nuggets and some things to think about for yourselves. And as I said earlier, for your friends, for your work colleagues, for people in your team. Now we can open up the floor to some questions if you'd like to put any in the chat. I'm not sure if we're really seeing anything there, David, coming through, but
there was one question which was, why is it a collective gender experience to feel imposter syndrome? Has it been identified in men? Like you said, Nicole, we're not the experts when it comes to imposter syndrome, and we don't necessarily like the term in itself. So I don't know whether or not it's something that wants to be discussed by you or some of the alumni. But I did see that there was a comment in there about so many praises for Alicia.
Yeah. I wouldn't really think that, I don't think that this is something that is just that women are just prone to. I should imagine that a lot of men do. And I think in a lot of the debate at the moment, while it is amazing that women's voices are being heard a lot more, we have to be very careful not to generalize, and that the great value is in having a lot of different voices and on a topic, and lots of different insights. So we're we know that it is something that seems to be a big topic in women's leadership, and that's sort of where we're addressing it today. But that's not to say that a lot of other people don't, a lot of men don't feel that as well.
Nicole, I'm wondering if we could pick up one of the questions to Alicia. She talked about measuring what she has achieved, but without comparing. And so someone has asked, what is the yardstick? How do you do that, Alicia?
It's a long yardstick. No, I'm not sure. In all honesty, I did really only sort of enter this realm of imposter syndrome in the last week. Prior to that, I thought perhaps I had a little bit of anxiety. So in the last week, I've done obviously a lot of reflection, as you all would have heard. And I'm trying not to compare myself. I honestly don't know how to answer that question, to be honest.
I think maybe what Emma was talking to really touched on that sort of measurement as well. Not so much, let's not call it measurement, but your great tip around keeping track. I think, Lee, you touched on it as well, keeping track of your achievements. And I think that that is a very positive form of measurement, if you like, because it's about your personal progress.
I would agree. And I think the yardstick is different for everyone. And I think what I've tried to do in order to reflect on my achievements is I'm certainly very ambitious. So when I have an ambition, I usually have a goal. And so I'll use that as my benchmark of what I want to do. And once you get there, you're obviously looking for the next thing. And we very rarely look back and go, wow, I actually did that. I did that. So what I try and do, no matter what it is try and take some time to reflect on that. I love Emma's app idea because I probably should document it, because you achieve so much. And we're all, we're not just people in a professional context. We're fully formed people who have achieved a lot that can contribute to your professional existence. So, I used the metaphor before about, and this was brought to me by a colleague who is a migrant child whose parents opened a milk bar in suburban Victoria. And he worked behind the counter from a really young age to help translate for his parents. And this is the sum of all the parts that you bring to you. So he exhibited leadership from a really young age. And when you reflect on that and you see it through that lens, you go, wow, that is actually truly extraordinary. But we have all these micro experiences in our lives that we just take for granted are just what I do in my day. But when you actually reflect on that and you see that value that you've brought to any situation, getting kids to kinder is leadership masterclass every day. Like, if you can get your children out of the house alive, fed and clothed, like, amazing, right? But we don't, as women, we often don't reflect on those experiences. So when we talk about yardsticks and comparisons, I think it's more about not comparing yourself to another woman or another male colleague. It's actually about reflecting upon all that you've achieved to overcome that imposter syndrome, because when you don't consider the whole person that you are when you come to work, and those skills that you bring, like negotiating with your kids, is amazing. Then you go, well, I can probably negotiate at a very difficult meeting that I have to do later today. That's sort of what I would take from the comparison question, because I don't compare myself to other people. I always try and set my own benchmarks of achievement myself, but look back on what I've achieved.
Fantastic. Emma, did you have anything else that you wanted to add on that?
I think for me, coming from a corporate background, it's important to document and reflect on your achievements. And the reason I say that is because we are dealing with such an issue with the gender pay gap, that I find I need to force myself to document these things, because then it provides me and my line manager and whoever else needs to know some data essentially to show that I have exceeded my roles and responsibilities and that I deserve to be compensated for that. And anecdotally, from speaking to girlfriends and other women in the workplace, it's not something that we're traditionally comfortable with. And so for me, it's a way to take the emotion out of it, to take, that, again, that imposter syndrome out of it, because as you're documenting it in real time, you've got this record. And if you have a 6-month or a 12-month performance review, you've got that list ready to go. And you can make sure that all of the things that you have done, which are often above and beyond, what is in your day-to-day job description, are there. And like that's presented back to whoever needs to know. And I think it's something that we need to have very much front of mind, particularly as women in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, thank you. So I realise that some of you, well, a lot of you are probably having to head back into work, and I don't think we're getting any more questions coming through just at the moment.
We did have another good question, Nicole, come through, which has a bit of context to it as well. So I'll read it out. But my imposter syndrome means that I'm always the one being asked to do things to help other organisations do significant things on a volunteer basis, and often the only one in the room who's not being paid for their time. I feel like a lot of women do the same thing because they don't see their value and overgive. How do you assert your value confidently without burning bridges so you are not forever that one overused volunteer? Great question.
Thank you, Melissa Hale, for that question. Lee, I think you're ready to go on that one.
I'll reflect on an experience that happened probably 15 years ago where it was the first time I verbalized, and it was challenging because imposter syndrome also is something that inhibits us from actually using our voices. When you feel that potentially you are being maligned or taken for granted. And it came around an International Women's Day event in a public service office, and all the labour was assigned to the admin staff and the PAs to sort out morning teas and to sort out all of these activities relating to an International Women's Day event. And it didn't sit comfortably for many reasons. And then everyone shows up and they have their morning tea and they clap the ladies on the back and say, "Good job, girls, off you go." And they go back to their desks and no one cleans up. So the admin team and the PAs have to go back and clean up. And it was the first time I vocalised my discomfort with that, which was International Women's Day is actually not about cupcakes. It is about elevating and recognising the contribution of women and their work, particularly in this context. So in your situation, it sounds like this is a very delicate conversation because you have relationships that you need to manage. But one of the things about imposter syndrome, and Alicia touched on this as well, is finding your voice. It's really important to trust yourself and back yourself. It is very frightening to be a strong woman in this world because you get called names for being a strong woman, and we don't want to be doing that. And we often have to tone check things with other colleagues because they might think it's too harsh, or we're constantly guessing ourselves over and over and over again. But one of the things that you can do to overcome your imposter syndrome is find your voice and take up space and use that voice, because then once you've actually stuck a claim there saying, I actually deserve to be here and I need to be heard, it gives you more confidence to continue to lead in that space. And that happened to me about 15 years ago. And I remember just like, this is not, why are we getting that? This is, can't the leaders in this space make the cupcakes or make the tea, or why are we doing this? We're just basically not actually identifying what the real issue is. So when I did that, I was terrified and I wasn't confident it was going to be recognized well, but it was a very delicate conversation, but it needed to be said. And that pulled me out of me feeling like an imposter that I didn't have a voice. So my suggestion to you is to find that voice and don't let your inner saboteur silence her. It might be a delicate conversation, but yeah, it's really important.
Great, thank you, Lee. I think, Alicia, what you were saying in your, earlier in your little talk as well, was there were some really important points there on this topic around sort of owning those roles. You know, you are not a farmer's wife, you are a farmer. The aspects of your role are really important to your business operating. So I think there's something that you were saying in there about, really owning these roles and making them valued and making sure everyone else recognises how valued they are.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually mentioned to you on the phone, and it stuck with me since I mentioned it. And I remember filling out our daughter's school, their applications for school. And I wrote in there, it sort of said, what is your husband, occupations? And I wrote in there that my husband was a farm manager. And then I thought, oh, what do I write? Well, I suppose I just write mother and wife. And then I had this alarming moment where I thought, I've been farming since I was 18 on my own. I moved out of home and I was going farming. And I went and lived in the middle of Timbuktu all by myself as an 18-year-old girl, and decided this is what I was going to pursue. And then I married a man who was already a farmer, and I took on that role of farmer's wife. And it is such a bloody overused word where we live. Oh, yep, I'm a farmer's wife. Well, no, you are a farmer. And I said this to a friend the other day, and she went, oh, no, I'm not a farmer. I said, you are a farmer. You drive tractors and you do sheep work, and so you're a farmer. And yeah, I think it's all about making sure that it's okay to say who we are, even if it's predominantly a male dominant role. It's okay to be a farmer, I suppose.
Definitely. Okay, we're Emma, unless you had something else to add on that, I think we're pretty much done for today. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us for this fabulous little lunchtime session, and thank you so much to our 3 fabulous speakers. So many insights, so much sharing, and just such wonderful giving in such a short time. And, it just, for me, it just really points out the fact that, women's leadership is something that we all really just have to keep working on. We need that pipeline of women leaders at every single level of experience within organisations, within the community. I hope this has given you some incentive to keep going and to support others to do so as well. So thank you very much for joining us today.